Right now in Britain, people live to around 80 years old on average. Clean water, vaccines, antibiotics, workplace safety regulations. These things add decades to human life. Take them away and watch what happens. In Victorian London, most working people never saw 50. 40 was common. 30 wasn't unusual. Cut your expected lifespan in half, and you're getting close to their reality. This wasn't a genetic problem. It wasn't bad luck. The city itself was killing them. London had grown into the largest city on Earth by the mid-1800s. Over 2 million people packed into streets that weren't built for a fraction of that number. No planning, no regulations, just explosive growth driven by industry and profit. Buildings went up wherever they could fit. Streets narrowed as structures pressed together. Rooms got subdivided again and again to squeeze in more tenants. The result was density that suffocated. Walk through districts like Bethnal Green or Whitechapel, and you'd struggle to see sky between the roof lines. Buildings stood so close, their walls shared moisture. Chimneys lined up shoulder to shoulder, pumping smoke that had nowhere to go but down into the streets and through windows into rooms where people lived. Air didn't circulate. It sat there, thick and heavy. Inside a typical lodging house near Spitalfields, beds were rented by the shift. One person got up, another person lay down in sheets still warm and damp from the previous occupant. 20 people might cycle through the same mattress in a week. The air inside these places tasted like sweat, coal smoke, and unwashed fabric. After an hour, your throat burned, your eyes stung. Nausea came not from illness, but from oxygen deprivation and chemical irritation. Step outside and nothing improved. Narrow alleys trapped sound between brick walls. Cartwheels scraped stone constantly. Iron struck iron. Vendors shouted over each other. Factory whistles pierced through everything. Horses stamped and coughed from their own respiratory distress. The noise never stopped. Not during the day, not at night. Ears rang continuously. Sleep came in broken fragments. Rest was incomplete. Near Covent Garden Market, bodies pressed past each other in air thick with smoke and organic decay. The smell of human waste mixed with rotting food. Flies swarmed. Stomachs turned even when empty. The city invaded your body through your nose and lungs before you ate a single meal. This wasn't a crisis. This was Tuesday. This was every day. And it was already shortening lives before disease even entered the equation. Inside the rooms where people actually lived, conditions got worse. In Shoreditch and Clerkenwell, entire families occupied single rooms. Not a single apartment, a single room. One space for sleeping, eating, washing, working, giving birth, dying. Everything happened in the same 12 by 12 square. A bed against one wall, maybe a second mattress that rolled up during daytime. A table that served every function. No unused space existed. You could touch both walls at once. Privacy was impossible. Conversations happened at whisper volume because neighbors were inches away through paper-thin walls. A pot of soup steaming on a fire filled the room with moisture that condensed on cold windows and never dried. Windows stayed shut because opening them let in cold air that cost precious heat from coal fires. Sleep schedules staggered. In lodging houses around Limehouse, beds operated on rotation. Sheets stayed damp from previous bodies. Mattresses held the shape of whoever slept there last. When one person shifted, the movement traveled through the frame to everyone else. Washing happened when water could be spared and carried from distant pumps. One basin served multiple faces. The water turned gray quickly. Shirts got shaken out and worn again. Soap was expensive, shaved into tiny slivers. Clothes hung near ceilings, never fully drying. Skin stayed irritated. Small cuts lingered for weeks. When sickness entered, isolation was impossible. A fever in one body meant fever in others. In Clerkenwell, someone would sweat through the night while family members watched from arm's length away. Breathing turned irregular. Requests for water came in weak voices. There was nowhere else to put the sick person. They stayed where they were. Children observed from inches away, learning that illness was normal and recovery was optional. Arguments flared over nothing, then flattened. The room absorbed everything. Morning came with the same heavy air, the same warm bedding holding yesterday's heat, the same bodies rising already exhausted. This wasn't collapse. This was routine. And without real rest, the body degraded quietly, invisibly, over years. The damage accumulated in ways people couldn't measure, but definitely felt. Now add waste to this equation, and the situation becomes truly toxic. The smell hit before anything else, thick, sour, warm, like spoiled food trapped in your mouth. Like an overflowing latrine that nobody emptied. It stuck in your throat and wouldn't leave. People breathed it every single day. Human waste didn't disappear in Victorian London. It collected close by. Chamber pots got emptied into pits behind buildings, into shallow drains along alleys, into corners supposedly out of sight, but never far away. At night, men carried buckets through shared passages trying not to spill. By morning, the smell stayed on their hands and followed them back indoors. In shared courtyards, privies overflowed regularly. Liquid seeped into soil, then surfaced again after rain. The smell changed with weather. Heat made it sharp and sickeningly sweet. Damp air made it heavy like something rotting under wet cloth. People gagged, swallowed it back, rubbed their noses raw. Eyes watered continuously, throats scratched constantly. Someone would say, "It'll pass." It rarely did. Rain made everything worse because it spread the contamination instead of washing it away. Water ran downhill through filth, carrying it into basements, through doorways, into the edges of rooms. Shoes tracked it across floors. Bedding absorbed it. The smell intensified like someone stirred it deliberately. And drinking water stood right next to where waste settled. Pumps were positioned close to cesspits. Buckets got filled from sources that looked clear and cold. Nobody could see what moved inside that water at microscopic levels. Tea got brewed. Soup got thinned. Children drank deeply. Within hours, stomachs cramped, heads ached. Mouths went dry. Someone sat down suddenly, face pale, jaw clenched, waiting for the wave to pass. Complaints stayed quiet because irritation was constant. Skin broke out in rashes, bowels loosened, fevers came and went. Work continued anyway. Meals got eaten, rent got paid. This was London. You endured it because stopping didn't remove the smell, and leaving wasn't possible. The body learned to function inside contamination. It adapted to the taste, and slowly, without noise or warning, it began failing. Water looked ordinary. That made it dangerous. Clear, cold, seemingly safe. It came from pumps that had served neighborhoods for generations. Women and children carried it home in buckets multiple times daily. They boiled it for tea, used it for cooking, drank it straight when thirsty. Inside that innocent-looking liquid, invisible threats multiplied. Cholera bacteria thrived in water contaminated by human waste. Typhoid spread through the same route. Dysentery moved from gut to ground to water to gut in an endless cycle. The connection wasn't understood yet. Germ theory was still years away from acceptance. People knew water could make you sick but didn't know why. They blamed bad air, moral weakness, God's punishment, anything except the actual cause. Cholera hit fast and brutal. A healthy person at breakfast could be dead by dinner. It started with stomach cramps and loose bowels. Within hours, the body purged itself violently from both ends. Fluids drained at catastrophic rates. Skin turned grayish-blue. Eyes sank into skulls. Pulse weakened. Limbs went cold. Death came from dehydration so severe the blood thickened and the heart simply stopped. Watching someone die from cholera was traumatic. The speed alone was shocking. The suffering was intense, and it happened publicly because privacy didn't exist. Everyone heard the sounds, smelled the results, witnessed the deterioration. When one person got cholera, others followed quickly because they shared the same water source. An outbreak could kill dozens in a neighborhood within days. Bodies piled up faster than burial systems could handle. Streets smelled like death because death was everywhere. Typhoid worked slower but just as deadly. It produced high fever that lasted weeks. Confusion set in. Internal bleeding started. About 1 in 5 died. Those who survived often carried permanent organ damage. Recovery was incomplete. Dysentery caused bloody diarrhea that weakened victims over days. Children died from it frequently because their small bodies couldn't withstand the fluid loss. The water that was supposed to sustain life was delivering death. Every drink was a gamble. Every meal cooked with contaminated water carried risk. Every wash with tainted water spread bacteria to skin, to cuts, to eyes and mouth. Avoiding water wasn't possible. Humans need it constantly. So people drank and cooked and washed and died. And the cycle continued because nobody understood the mechanism. Even when the connection between water and disease started becoming clear, fixing the problem required infrastructure that didn't exist. Sewers needed complete rebuilding. Water sources needed protection. Waste needed proper disposal systems. These changes required money and political will. Both were in short supply when it came to working-class neighborhoods. So the contamination continued. Cholera came in waves throughout the 1800s. Each outbreak killed thousands. Between outbreaks, typhoid and dysentery maintained steady pressure. The death toll was constant, just distributed over time instead of concentrated in epidemic bursts. Children suffered most because they drank more relative to body weight. They played in streets where waste collected. They put dirty hands in mouths. Infant mortality was staggering. Parents expected to lose children. Preparing for death became more common than preparing for life. Sickness wasn't hidden in Victorian London. It was visible everywhere. People moved slower than they should. A man stopped every few steps, coughing into cloth already stained dark. A woman leaned against walls, eyes unfocused, breath shallow. Faces were pale, lips cracked and dry. Nobody asked what was wrong, because everyone already knew. These illnesses didn't visit and leave, they stayed. Cholera struck fast, but tuberculosis settled in for years. It lodged in lungs and multiplied slowly. The cough started mild, almost polite. Then it grew persistent. Bloody sputum appeared, first as flecks, then as significant amounts. Weight dropped despite attempts to eat more. Strength evaporated over months. The person became a fragile shell, ribs visible with every breath. Tuberculosis was incredibly contagious, spreading through coughs and shared air in crowded rooms. Entire families caught it, passing it back and forth continuously. Look inside a room where someone has consumption. They lie still, breathing carefully, because deep breaths trigger coughing fits. A cloth rests in their hand, stained rust brown from blood. Today, a short course of antibiotics would clear the infection completely. Rest and nutrition would restore health. Back then, medicine didn't exist in any real form. Doctors were expensive luxuries. Real treatment was priced beyond what working families could pay. Instead, they relied on what they could afford: tonics promising strength, powders that numbed pain temporarily, drops meant to calm coughs, placebos passed between neighbors as cures. People swallowed them faithfully. Nothing improved. Outside, a mother sat on steps holding her sick child. The baby cried in sharp bursts, then weakened, face twisted in pain. The mother rocked back and forth, whispering, pressing her cheek against the child's burning forehead. Her own hands trembled. She was sweating, feverish. She was sick too. There was nothing to give except her failing body. The smell was layered, sickness over sickness. But underneath that, something else: sorrow, waiting, the quiet calculation of who would survive another day. People kept working because stopping meant falling behind. Rent didn't pause for illness. Food didn't appear from sympathy. So they endured fevers, coughs, weakness, telling themselves it would pass. Sometimes it did. Often it didn't. These diseases didn't need to kill quickly to be effective. They shaved away time. A year lost here, another there. Strength never returned completely. Breeding stayed compromised. Bodies aged prematurely. This was how 40 became the ceiling, not through single dramatic deaths, but through accumulated damage over decades of living sick. Childhood ended early in Victorian London. Children were easy to spot, not because they played, but because their faces still carried something unbroken. Wide eyes, high voices, quick laughter that stopped just as suddenly. But their bodies told different stories. Small hands were already rough, fingernails split, knuckles stayed swollen. Shoulders sat too low, pulled down by weight they shouldn't carry yet. A boy ran with a basket nearly as large as his torso, breath short, mouth open. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and kept moving. Work waited. These children weren't visiting the adult world. They were already functioning inside it. Some climbed where adults couldn't fit. Chimneys scraped skin and filled lungs with soot. When they emerged, faces were blackened except for pale circles around eyes. They blinked, coughed, smiled briefly, proud to be useful. The cough stayed permanently. Others stood beside machines that didn't slow down. Belts spun continuously. Rollers pulled fabric through without pause. Fingers hovered dangerously close. A girl flinched at sudden noise, then forced herself still. Fear wasted time. Time cost money. Look at their faces closely. Softness remained there. Rounded cheeks, unbroken expressions. They looked like children even as their bodies began failing them. Backs bent early. Knees ached constantly. Feet swelled inside worn shoes. At night, they slept deeply, not from peace, but from total exhaustion. Growth paused. Recovery didn't happen. Illness settled easily in small frames. Coughs sounded thin and sharp. Fever returned repeatedly. Cuts reopened before healing. When sickness slowed them down, they got pushed back to work as soon as they could stand. Rest was brief. Replacement was easy. A child sat on a step, head tilted forward, eyes half closed. Someone told him to move. He blinked, nodded, stood. Not stubborn, just already tired at age 8. These children didn't grow into adulthood cleanly. They arrived carrying damage. Lungs already strained, bones already stressed, strength already spent. They wouldn't remember a time when the body felt light. This was how lives shortened without single fatal moments, by taking years before they fully formed, by letting children survive with innocence in faces, while bodies underneath quietly broke. Many didn't die young, they just grew up damaged, and that damage defined the rest of their shortened lives. Reaching 40 in Victorian London didn't mean old age, it meant endurance. Most people didn't collapse as children. They survived childhood, learned trades, worked, built families. But every year extracted something. Nothing ever fully gave it back. This wasn't one cause, it was accumulation. Air that never cleared, shortened breath. Noise that never stopped, fragmented sleep. Crowded rooms eliminated recovery time. Contamination entered bodies repeatedly. Illness didn't leave cleanly. Childhood labor bent bodies before growth finished. Each stress alone was survivable. Together they reshaped life expectancy. By 40, working bodies carried records of all of it. A man still showed up to work, but moved carefully now. His breath shortened on stairs. Hands ached mornings and never fully loosened. A woman kept pace through days, but rested longer between tasks. Vision blurred in low light. Strength came and went unpredictably. These weren't elderly bodies. They were bodies used continuously without pause. Stopping wasn't an option. No pension existed, no sick leave, no system to catch someone slowing down. If you couldn't work, you slipped. If you slipped, you vanished. So people adjusted expectations. Pain became routine. Weakness became familiar. Early decline felt normal because it was universal. When someone died at 45, it was noted, then absorbed. The city kept moving. The number mattered not because life ended at 40, but because life narrowed there. Energy ran out sooner. Recovery failed earlier. Each year past that point was borrowed time, lived carefully, with shrinking margin for error. It's easy to mistake this for inevitability. It wasn't. Nature didn't decide these limits. A city built without protection asked bodies to absorb the cost of growth. Consider what accumulated by age 40. Lungs scarred from decades breathing coal smoke and industrial fumes. Reduced capacity, chronic inflammation, susceptibility to respiratory infection. Joints worn down from repetitive labor starting in childhood. Cartilage degraded, inflammation constant, mobility decreasing. Cardiovascular system strained by poor nutrition, contaminated environment, and physical stress. Weakened heart, damaged blood vessels, poor circulation. Digestive system compromised by contaminated water and inadequate food. Chronic infections, malabsorption, organ damage. Immune system weakened by malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and constant disease exposure. Inability to fight new infections effectively. Dental health destroyed by poor nutrition and no dental care. Missing teeth, chronic infections spreading to bloodstream. Vision and hearing damaged by industrial work environments and untreated infections. Each system was compromised. None functioned at full capacity. The body was running on reserves it didn't have. Then something happened. A workplace injury that didn't heal properly because the immune system was too weak. A flu that someone healthier would shake off, but this body couldn't fight. A bout of pneumonia that settled into lungs already damaged. What should have been recoverable became fatal. The body had nothing left. No reserves to draw on. No resilience to mount defense. Deterioration happened fast once it started. Days or weeks from illness to death. Another casualty added to statistics that kept climbing. Multiply this across hundreds of thousands, and you see the pattern. 40 wasn't the ceiling from genetics. It was the ceiling because every aspect of urban environment extracted tolls that compounded over time. Air pollution damaged respiratory systems progressively. Water contamination spread diseases repeatedly. Overcrowding facilitated constant contagion. Poor nutrition undermined every bodily function. Excessive labor wore down tissues faster than repair. Lack of medical care meant small problems became fatal ones. These weren't separate issues affecting different people. They were interconnected stresses hitting everyone simultaneously. The remarkable thing wasn't that people died young. It was that anyone survived at all. Those who made it past 40 were statistical outliers. Genetic luck, slightly better circumstances, and stubborn refusal to die let them defy overwhelming odds. They were celebrated as examples of longevity, when really they were just survivors of systematic culling. The wealthy experienced completely different London. Space to breathe, cleaner water, better nutrition, medical care, freedom from industrial labor. Their life expectancy stretched into 70s and 80s, proving the difference wasn't biological but circumstantial. The same city that killed the poor sustained the rich. Brutal proof that environment determines outcome. Victorian London didn't kill through violence. It consumed time through air people breathed, water they drank, rooms they slept in, work forced on them too early. 40 wasn't a curse or natural limit. It was the outcome of a system making human bodies pay for economic growth. Every shortened life was preventable. Every premature death was a choice, not by victims, but by those who built and ran the city without protecting its most vulnerable inhabitants. The mechanisms that made Victorian London lethal still exist today. Rapid growth without infrastructure, profit over human welfare, acceptance of suffering as inevitable, exploitation of vulnerable populations. They operate in different contexts now, but the pattern remains. Developing world megacities, marginalized communities in wealthy nations, anywhere human beings are treated as expendable rather than valuable. The lesson isn't just historical. It's a warning about what happens when societies fail to protect people, when economic growth divorces from human well-being, when we accept preventable deaths as costs of progress. Those 40-year lifespans weren't natural. They were chosen through decisions prioritizing profit over people. Every death was avoidable. Every shortened life was collective failure. The victims weren't weak. They were ordinary people in impossible circumstances, fighting daily to survive in a city that didn't care if they lived or died. Their stories deserve remembering, not as curiosities from the past, but as evidence of what humans endure and what must never be accepted again. If this reconstruction of Victorian survival gave you perspective on how cities shape lives inside them, consider supporting the channel. Like the video if it held your attention. Subscribe for more historical reconstructions. Share it so others can see what 40 years meant when simply surviving was an accomplishment. Thank you for watching.